Welcome, everybody. I thank you so much for being here. I am Linda Melanson. I own the Awakened Being page, and I have a series that I've been running about the history of our people and its connection to magic. And I think this topic is like super interesting for the simple fact that there's so many different types of magic that have been running through this world, so many different ways that we have used magic, especially in our ancient cultures. I'm particularly interested in 5500 BC. And so there were four main cultures that were um, alive at that time. They were the Australians, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and the Asians, the Chinese. And each one were specializing in special areas, different areas. Very interesting stuff to me, and it just kind of reiterates that we are an experimentation. We are, um, a species that was brought together or created to see how it would manifest in this particular physical world on this planet Earth. Um, and I mean, you can make your own judgments on it, but I'm also deep into Dolores Cannon and learning about um, extraterrestrials and their plans here for us and all that fun stuff. So today I want to discuss the Sumerians. The Sumerians are very, very, very interesting. And as a matter of fact, um, so the Tree of Life. First of all, subscribe if you are interested in this topic of information. Please subscribe so that you get to know when I go live or when there's more information being released. Um, Okay, so the Sumerians were alive. Their place of living was around Egypt. Now, I read a book a long time ago called Constantine, and they talked about the essence of life. Because the Iraq was considered one of the most fruitful grounds, most fruitful places to live and grow crops and be. So it brought with it a lot of people. They even back in 5500, they had 80,000 people, up to 80,000 people living in one city, and there were many, many cities close to each other. And so I thought that was really fascinating. That's a very large city. I mean, I think Moncton is the Moncton, the city that I live in, is close to 80 to 100,000 people living in it. So, that's quite a good sized city. Um, the other thing that I think is really friggin' interesting, which I'm like, wow, how so when you're reading in the history, and so the Sumerians were the first ones to create writing. Well, I can't say they were first. The Egyptians were doing hieroglyphs, so they were coming up with a way to write down or record some of their experiences. They were coming up with that. But the Sumerians were the first ones to come up with tablets. So they were clay tablets that they would scribe into in the cuneiform. And they have in those cuneiform tablets a lot of information that was written down, a lot of stories about the great floods, like all the early biblical stories come from the Sumerians. And there is some stories that talk about their very first king living for 43,200 years. Now, I think this is very interesting. Again, when we look at Egypt, so from my studies, Egypt, there were people that they were the survivors of Atlantis. Atlantis was extraterrestrials coming together to live in harmony with one another, all that fun stuff. Um, but what happened was at about 5,500 years, um, they started to do rituals that was going to make the soul live forever. So this is more than just making the soul live forever. This is a soul that is able to remember things through the life and death process, which was really important. So we need to be able to carry the energies from the lives or from the energies of previous lives into our new life. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, the other thing is that they had pharaohs and kings who were the communicators between the extraterrestrials or the gods, extraterrestrials, and the humans. But here in here for the Sumerians, it's a little bit different, right? So the king is said to have lived 43,000 years, and he ruled for, does it say? It doesn't say how long he ruled. 2,500 years. So from 5,500, 2,500 years he ruled the people. That's from what I understand from the text that I've read. Now, the Sumerians were responsible for the Bible, but they were also, after the cultures split, so after they were taken over, later on, their culture started to split. So then different areas started to become apparent through the Sumerian line. Now, not necessarily the Sumerians themselves, but the Sumerians were responsible for some of the early biblical stories. Like I said, the flood. What were some other ones? I have them written down. Um, they were also responsible for writing, how to plow, law. So they're the ones that put governments in place and started to kind of put things like that together. They were really good at reading cycles, and they developed the calendar and time. The literature, they developed their own language in the cuneifer. Am I saying that right? Cuneiform. And the alphabet, so the early alphabet. So they would use different symbols, excuse me, and stuff for early alphabet. Um, they developed irrigation techniques, did monuments. All right, so there was. I'm trying to see if I. Oh, okay. So they also wrote about the Garden of the Garden of Eden, and magic was a big part of their everyday life too, right? So they would use magic in their science, their medical, literature, and religion. So magic was a huge part of their daily life, just like the Egyptians. They use magic every single day. Now, I think this is really interesting. They would try to combat against negative consequences caused from a result from unknown sin, and thus losing favor of a god or goddess. So it was always, again, the same idea as the Egyptians, trying to gain favor with the gods so that they wouldn't suffer consequences if the gods were unhappy with them. They were under direction of Assyrian kings. They performed rituals for the king to renew images of the gods. They could cure ailments using salves and other remedies. So they were, even early as like 5,500 BC, were already using healing methods that were lost to the ages, right? Um, Diviners would interpret omens from the gods, and we're still doing stuff like that today. They also would read the stars, so the celestial and terrestrial phenomenons. They would actually read the organs of their sacrifices from the animals. So they would read the liver and the gallbladder were the main ones that they used to receive omens from the gods. They started to put anti-witchcraft in rituals, and and I think this is funny. They started performing anti-witchcraft rituals. It just when I read it, I kind of chuckled at it because I thought, wow, you're doing a ritual to ban people who do rituals. And that started around 1894 to 1595 BC. That's when they started to put away some of the magical objects and images that they were believing in at that time. Um, they were the biggest reason why they were trying to ban witchcraft and all of this stuff was because they believed that the witches were performing rituals that were causing people to act against their own will. Um, Dogs were associated with healing practices. Um, there was also which I never knew this, Lamastiti, Lamashti, Lamashti. She was considered a demon who would attack pregnant women and infants. And there were amulets with crystals and symbols on them to help protect them from that. They often did offerings to the gods and the elements. And they would use smoke and oil to tell the future. And I thought that was really interesting, using smoke and oil to tell the future. Um, they did different types of dream interpretation, communing with the dead. So, as you can see, there were all types of magic that was used. Now, again, I just want to remind you that the every ancient culture except for the Australians practiced magic, and every ancient culture fell except for the Australian culture. The Australian culture lives on today. So I find that's really an interesting thing that, and it also is, maybe we are a little bit of an experiment to see, if we use our will to create, what does that bring to us? If we will use our will to create, what does it do? And yeah, this has all been very interesting, um, very interesting studying for me. The Sumerians broke off into, let me just see here. Um, so the Ubaid took over, then Uruk, the early dynasty, the Akkadian period, the Gutian, and Ur. Those were all the different periods of the Samaria history. The other thing, too, I think is really interesting when they talk about the Assyrian kings. The Assyrian kings were, I can't talk enough about it because I don't know enough, but I do think that just even the name Assyrian kind of goes with the whole thing. Okay. Anyways, thank you very much for watching.